happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop here. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Hello, welcome to the program. I'm your host, Marty, and you are in the Breakroom, Single Stories. And the song that we're going to be taking a look at today is a political song, not a protest song. Protest kind of means, in my mind's eye anyhow, that you're against whatever they're talking about, but you can be for or against something. So we'll just call it political in general. In fact, the song we're listening to right below me here is For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield, which was also a political song that did well. Two of the members of that group, Stephen Stills and Neil Young, are also in the band that we're going to be covering today. That is the focus of our song. And Neil Young is a good Canadian. And because of that, in November 1969, he probably was aware of a song that did really well up in Canada. It did okay here, but it reached #1 in Canada. It was from a band called The Original Cast. And the interesting thing, and the reason why we have it on this episode, is because there's a term that Neil uses in his song that's coming up, and also they used, that's kind of, it's not an unusual word or a phrase, but people normally say toy soldier. And for Neil, he uses tin soldier, and of course the band we're going to listen to also uses that phrase. The song that we're going to take a look at first before we get into the story of Ohio by Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. This song we're going to listen to is a song that most people know of by another band. The other band is Coven. And they did a version of the song that was in the movie Billy Jack. But here's the original cast doing their original song, One Tin Soldier. So sit back, relax, fire up a Colortini, and watch the pictures as they fly through the air. We'll be right back.
To a story that was written long ago about a kingdom on a mountain and the valley folk below. On the mountain was a treasure buried deep beneath a stone, and the valley people swore they'd have it for their very own. Go ahead and hate your neighbor, go ahead and cheat a friend, then in the name of heaven, justify it in the end. While the trumpets blowing, come the judgment day, on the bloody morning after. One tin soldier rides
away.
Like, subscribe, comment. Music History thanks you.
What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Here, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Here, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop. Here, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Back to this episode of Single Stories. Now, our story begins in April of 1970, around April 30th. Then President Nixon announces that he's authorized U.S. troops to go into the country of Cambodia in hopes that's going to help win the war that we're fighting against Vietnam. And this is totally illegal according to the Constitution. You can't just take troops and go into another country. But this is what Nixon does. And needless to say, it pisses off a lot of people.
This is the decision I have made. In cooperation with the armed forces of South Vietnam, attacks are being launched this week to clean out major enemy sanctuaries on the Cambodian-Vietnam border. A major responsibility for the ground operations is being assumed by South Vietnamese forces.
One of the big problems is that Nixon kind of ran on the fact that he was going to end the war, but Reagan troops into Cambodia, that's not ending the war, that's expanding the war, and they're going to have more soldiers coming in, and most of those soldiers are going to be coming in from obviously kids of a certain age in the United States. And at the time, America's in bad shape. We've had assassinations of the Kennedys, of Martin Luther King, the war is going on. Nixon, I said, is going to go ahead and jump into Cambodia without the proper way of doing it, which is through Congress. So students here in the U.S. are really upset about this. In fact, they all decide to go ahead and have a rally on May 1st, which is a Friday, I believe. So quite a few, I was told maybe about 400 different colleges and universities have a rally on their campuses on May 1st. In a small town in Ohio, Kent, which is northeast of Akron, what Kent is known for as a town is, in their town is Kent State University, which is kind of a political college during this time in America's history. And they do have a rally on the 1st, and what they do is they hold it on an area known as the Commons, which is kind of an area on campus. It's like a grassy area where they have a lot of rallies and big events, and that's where they hold this rally on May 1st. And what they do is they symbolically bury the Constitution, obviously saying that if Nixon doesn't agree with it, then why should we? So they bury the Constitution, and they all agree that on Monday, the 4th, they'll have another rally around noon. So that's what's agreed upon as we leave the campus on May 1st. Now that night, it's a nice night. It's kind of one of the first warm nights in a while since winter left, and now it's spring. And a lot of the college kids who live on campus, obviously, go into the small town of Kent, and they go into the bars, they start drinking and that kind of thing. And a lot of the talk is about Cambodia, what's going on there. These guys don't want to be drafted, and they're really pissed off about what Nixon has done. And a couple kids outside took trash cans and are burning them in the middle of the street and that kind of thing. And the mayor of Kent is kind of concerned about it, and he kind of feels that his police are overwhelmed. They don't have that many police officers in this small little town, and there's a lot of students causing trouble, some bikers out there causing trouble. So what the mayor does, he calls for a state of emergency, and he puts a curfew on for midnight that night. So all these students and people that are in these bars and clubs along a certain area in Kent are all told to leave at midnight. So now you have 2,000 pissed off drunk kids on the street, and it gets really bad. Some of the students, as they're going back to campus to their dorms, are busting windows and vandalizing places. It was a bad situation. The mayor is so concerned that he actually contacts the governor and asks for the National Guard to come down to Kent and the campus, because he's heard some crazy stories about stuff that's supposed to be happening the next couple days in the town and also on campus. And so the governor of Ohio, Jim Rhodes, actually calls in the National Guard. Saturday comes, and again, a lot of the students are living on campus, and they're kind of not really having rallies per se on the campus, but they're in groups, and they're getting kind of rowdy. And so the National Guard starts coming in to the town of Kent, heading toward the college, and at a certain point, somebody ends up setting fire to the ROTC building, which is on campus, and ROTC stands for Reserve Officer Training Corps, I think. Reserve Officer Training Corps, is that right? And the ROTC building goes up in flames. On Sunday the 3rd, the governor of Ohio, Jim Rhodes, comes into town. He actually holds a press conference.
I want to say that they're not going to take over campus. And the campus now is going to be part of the county and the state of Ohio. There's no sanctuary for these people. We are going to eradicate the problem. We're not going to treat the symptom. And as long as this continues, higher education in Ohio is in jeopardy.
And he also bans demonstrations on the campus. And at this point, the students at Kent State want these National Guard soldiers off their campus. And what happens on the Sunday is, as it gets a little bit later, again, some of the students there start throwing rocks and stones at the National Guard. The National Guard soldiers put on their bayonets on their rifles. There's a few skirmishes. Some people get hurt. Some people actually get cut because of the bayonets. Tear gas is launched. And as Sunday, May 3rd ends, there is definitely bad blood between the National Guard and the students at Kent State. Monday, May 4th comes about, and it's a school day, so there are students on campus along with all these National Guard. There's about 100 National Guard soldiers, the garrison, that's actually on the campus. And the students are set on having this rally, even though they were told that there's no more demonstrations supposed to be allowed, according to the governor. And the National Guard is determined to, dispel any kind of assemblies. The National Guard starts kind of, again, getting into it with the students. There's maybe about 500 students total that are in the rally. There's another 1,500 students that are in the area of the Commons. That are kind of cheering on the students, and maybe another 1,200 students that are going in between classes and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of people there on the 4th. Garrison is split in two. So you've got about 50 and 50, or maybe 50-50. And what they're doing is they're trying to herd the students that are protesting into certain areas, or trying to get them around certain areas, so they're coming up and down and they're moving in. And the students are throwing rocks. They're throwing pieces of cement. At a certain point, it gets pretty crazy. In fact, here's a couple of pictures of two of the students that were killed in this massacre at Kent State. Jeffrey Miller and also William Schroeder. Tear gas canisters are lobbed into the crowd, and because of the way the wind's blowing, the smoke actually is blowing back into the National Guardsmen's faces, so that's not working. In fact, the students are grabbing the canisters and throwing them back at the National Guard, so it starts getting really bad. At a certain point, about 28-30, a National Guard that split up gets to the crest of a hill there on the Commons, and they turn and face the students. Student photographer John Philo is there taking pictures for the Kent Stater, which is a local magazine, or rather newspaper in town, and he's taking pictures of the demonstrations, just kind of going everywhere. And he's about 260 feet away from the actual National Guard troops in like a little sidewalk area, and he kind of notices Jeffrey Miller maybe a couple feet away, and he's talking to a young girl. On a side note, there are 3 students that will later become known musicians in this country who are attending Kent State, and 2 of them are actually at this rally. One of them is Chrissy Hyde of the Pretenders, and she's an art major, and she is there when the shooting starts at Kent State. Another individual who's going to become a famous musician is Mark Mothersbaugh, who's going to be a part of the band Devo, if you're familiar with that. He's an art student part-time, but he's not actually there. But another member of Devo, Gerald Casale. Casale is a member of SDS, which is a group on campus, kind of a political group, and the SDS stands for, I think, Students for Democratic Society. And he's about 130 yards away from the National Guard. He's standing in a parking lot. He also knows Jeff Miller, and Chrissy Hyde knows Jeff Miller. In fact, one of her friends actually dated Jeff Miller at one time, so she knows him. And another person that's standing right next to Jerry Casale is a student by the name of Allison Krause. Just about this time, the National Guard, again, gets in firing position, and for 13 seconds, they fire off 67 shots. Bystanders and students flee everywhere. They're diving for cover as as these bullets are flying through the campus. John Philo, the photographer who's standing, like I said, in a little bit of a sidewalk, he sees somebody down, and it's Jeff Miller, who's just been standing there talking to this girl. And by this time, the girl has run to his side and starts screaming, you know, somebody help, and he's obviously in bad shape. This tragic photo does a couple things. First of all, it wins John Philo the Pulitzer Prize for photography in 1971, I believe. But it galvanizes the anti-war movement in this country. The young girl that's with Jeff Miller is Mary Vecchio. Now, Mary Vecchio is not a student. She's a 14-year-old runaway who just happens to be on campus. And her picture in this photo is iconic. It really sums up the horror that was witnessed there at Kent State on May 4th. 4 students are actually killed during this 13 seconds. One of them, as I mentioned before, was William Schroeder. The next student, that's Allison Krauss, Jeff Miller, and also a young lady, her name is Sandra Schuler. An additional 9 students are also wounded. Now this story gets out, and it flies through the United States. Everyone knows about it. Everyone knows about this around the world. There are photos that come out, a few of them that are in newspapers. And the photo that John Philo takes is on the cover of Newsweek with Jeffrey and Mary. In Northern California, 2 members of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Neil Young and David Crosby, hear about the tragedy at Kent State on the radio, and they can't believe it. This is a big deal. In fact, because of this incident, America has its first national student strike. Over 2,500 schools go on strike. Colleges, universities, high schools, and even some junior high. 4 million students go on strike. By the time Life magazine puts out its May 15th issue, which has a picture of one of the students who was shot on the cover, Neil Young is starting to see all these photos that were maybe not known about, the pictures of the National Guardsmen aiming and that kind of thing. It really freaks him out. The story from David Crosby is that Neil goes out into the woods for about 20 minutes, comes back, and he has this song written. And David hears it, and he calls up Stephen Stills and Graham Nash that are in Los Angeles at the time, and he tells them, book a recording studio, we're coming down. Neil has written this song that we have to get recorded right away. David and Neil get to Southern California and they start rehearsing, and on May 21st they actually recorded the song. Now the problem is, at the time, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young have a song already on the charts, which is Teach Your Children, which is a Graham Nash song. But they all get together collectively and they realize, hey, it's kind of suicide to put out a song as another song is on the chart, but they feel this song is needed to be put out right away. And within 10 days, the song is released on June 4th. Here is Ohio.
We're
hits the air, and it is a big hit. In fact, a lot of the students who are at Kent State hear the song and feel, vindicated that it was an important changing moment in this country. For some, the shooting was a cultural loss of innocence in America. In 1971, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young do split up, but they rejoin again and get back together and break up again over the years. The governor of Ohio, James Rhode, and the commanding officer of the National Guards were not charged, but 25 students and faculty members were indicted on criminal charges. 8 guardsmen are charged with the violation of civil rights, but in 1974, all are acquitted. Chrissie Hynde moves to the UK and, of course, creates the band The Pretenders and has a career that most people are aware of. Mark and Jerry formed Devo, which is a band based on the tragedy. Jerry had been thinking about doing art that was kind of de-evolutionizing, saying that the world is kind of falling back into the old days. And he says that when he sees, National Guardsmen shooting people, he realizes that that's what's happening in this country. We're reverting back to the days where you didn't like somebody, you shot somebody. And being a kind of a hippie, he throws that all away and focuses on Devo, trying to make music that kind of showcases his feeling on the state of the United States. In fact, Chrissie and Jerry say that the experience at Kent State haunts them for years. Jerry claims that he's not right for a long time. In fact, he really feels he had a nervous breakdown. For me, the idea that music can promote or help a cause is normal. At least it was back in the 60s and 70s. Nowadays, you don't really see it too much. There's very few songs nowadays that actually have a political viewpoint. It's too scary for them. They don't want to lose part of their audience by saying something that people don't agree with. Imagine.
That sound, everybody look what's going down. Stop, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.